Good evening. Pardon me for interrupting the conversation at your tables. I'll do this a couple more times tonight. It's exciting that there is such a good buzz in the room, and not just from the dish machine, but from your voices, that you're engaging in conversation. Part of the reason that we have these dinners is because they bring the class together in a way that perhaps other events here at the school don't. But I want to welcome you all to your first international dinners, the class of 2016. My name is David Thompson, and I'm the director of the international programs here. I'm very lucky to hold this position, a position that was created 14 years ago by the class of 1948, who also started these dinners. So the class of 1948, for their 50th reunion, gave a significant reunion gift, and they said that they wanted to be known as the global class of Hotchkiss. Right? And so one of the things that they did is they created the job that I have today, and they also created these international dinners. Their main purpose was that they wanted to raise student awareness of international issues. In particular, they were very concerned about the issues of the developing world, because they felt, and I agree, that the issues of the developing world are issues that affect all of us and will impact your lives for the rest of your lives. Marcel Proust wrote, and I found this quote in The Week, the great intellectual journal that it is, but helpful nonetheless, wrote, "The only true voyage of discovery would not be to visit strange lands, but to behold the universe through the eyes of another." So in your time at Hotchkiss, you have an opportunity to learn how to behold the universe through the eyes of others, and I encourage you to do that. So finally, tonight's dinner, we hope that you'll get thinking about global issues. And perhaps tonight we'll plant a seed that over time will germinate and blossom into either a personal passion or a professional career. Daniel Heyman, tonight's speaker, sitting here at table 2, has had a chance to engage with many of the issues of the developing world that I mentioned earlier through his work in Sierra Leone and with MIT's Global Poverty Action Lab, the Jameel Poverty Action Lab. And as we'll hear later, what's interesting is that just 7 years ago, Daniel was sitting in this dining hall as a student and not necessarily thinking about working in the developing world, not necessarily thinking about the positive impact that microfinance and microenterprise can have on people's lives. He's probably thinking about, did he prepare for his next class? When does the snack bar open? Typical things, right? But however, perhaps Hotchkiss can claim some credit for what he's doing now, because Daniel is definitely living a life that's marked by global thinking and independent thinking. And these are two of the qualities that we hope that you will graduate with as well. So without too much further ado, it's a real pleasure to have Daniel back, and I really look forward to his comments, and I hope that you'll join me in welcoming him to the microphone. Have fun.
This will be good.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry to interrupt your dinner. I think I said yes to coming to speak at Hotchkiss, mostly because I was so surprised to be invited to come speak at Hotchkiss. I wasn't a particularly good student when I was here. I didn't really have that many long-lasting connections on a daily basis to the Hotchkiss community. So when I was invited, I was pretty excited to reconnect. The 14 to 18-year-old years are pretty important ones in our lives. But I wanted to share one story about my start to Hotchkiss, and hopefully that'll understand a little bit about where I began. You guys probably just got your first report cards. Did that just happen? I bet you guys did better than I did. So on my first report card, my freshman year French teacher wrote the exact phrase that she questioned my ability to make it at Hotchkiss. So that's pretty much why I was so stunned I was invited to come back. Yeah, Mr. Flum was laughing. That was Mrs. Vetpetic, by the way.
She's gone now.
Yeah, no, I know. Another reason I felt comfortable coming back. But I wanted to take the opportunity to discuss a little bit about why I think traveling is so important, or why living an international lifestyle is so important, and it's only going to get more important. So I'm going to do that in a few ways. I'm going to tell a little bit about my time in Sierra Leone. So I lived in Sierra Leone for MIT's Poverty Action Lab for almost 2 years. But before I get to that, I'm going to give a little context to the sort of work the Poverty Action Lab does. But as I do that, and I try not to bore you guys too much, I'd like you to interrupt me at any moment. Really, this is better if it's a conversation. So if you have any questions, if I haven't made myself clear, please interrupt.
Okay, I don't mean to sound dense, but Where is Sierra Leone?
So that's beautiful. So I told him not to ask that question when we were at dinner together. So Sierra Leone is on the west coast of Africa. Sort of, if you look at the map, it's kind of where the continent turns. It's right at that point where it turns in. Three countries up from Ghana, where a few of your classmates are from. A few countries down from Senegal. Awesome. And it's in the tropics, which, I mean, when you guys hear Sierra Leone, you probably think the movie Blood Diamond, if any of you guys have seen that. That was set in Sierra Leone. You think Blood Diamonds, civil war, sort of pretty negative thoughts. But one of the most impressive things about the country is just how beautiful it is. Just how different from the reputation in the United States a small little country on the west coast of Africa can be. So one of the things I want you to keep an open mind for when moving forward is the impression we get in the States of the world around us is always the sensationalist ones. The stories that make the news are always the crazy ones, not necessarily the real ones. And so when we're reading the news and thinking about the world around us and trying to learn a little bit on a day-to-day basis, I just want you guys to remember that the reality on the ground is never the same as reality on word. And there's no better way to learn something than to go and see it with your own eyes. Right? First-person research is always the most authentic. So that's my answer to Sierra Leone. But keep coming with questions. So I graduated college 3 years ago now without a plan. So no idea what I wanted to do. Mr. Bell's nodding his head because I didn't have a plan through most of my time at Hotchkiss or my time in college, so it's not much of a surprise that that trend continued. I did know that I like to travel. I mean, pretty much everyone at least enjoys traveling. I did know that every old person, and I mean old person I talked to, never said, I wish I traveled less, or I wish I started my career earlier, or I wish I explored less. No one will ever tell you those sentiments. So I said, OK, maybe I should explore a little bit and take some time. I did know that I liked a bit about economics. I changed majors 6 times while in college for evidence for my directionless nature. I dropped math senior year of high school, ended up being a math major. But the reason I was a math major is because I liked economics. And to really push the glass ceiling of economics, you need to have a good understanding of mathematics as well. So I knew I liked a bit about economics. I knew I liked a bit about traveling. And I thought maybe I wanted to get a PhD in economics. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but it's the best idea I had. And so I asked around, and it turned out there were 4 jobs you try to get if you want a PhD in economics. To give you an example of what some of those are, the New York Federal Reserve Bank. Does that sound exciting to anyone? No. The National Bureau of Economic Review. Maybe worse than the Reserve, maybe better, I don't know. So when I heard about the Poverty Action Lab, which does economic research at MIT, but you're not based at MIT, they send you all around the world, I signed up. The mission of the Poverty Action Lab is an interesting one and a simple one, and I want you guys to think about it for a second. It asks the question, what works and what doesn't work when you're trying to make a difference in the world? The truth is, we don't have an answer to it. In the past 50 years, we've given away trillions of dollars to poor countries or worse off countries, and they're still poor and they're still worse off. Some are doing well, some are not, and we don't really know why that is. We don't. We have to be honest with ourselves. We do a crap job of understanding development economics. All right? Before I get into a little bit more about personal anecdotes on what the lab does, I want to tell a story a professor told me when I was a sophomore in college in a class called Global Economics. I got a C in that class, so I may not have gotten the full point of the story, but I still think about it a lot. So it tells the story of his first time in Ghana. So the professor is Salia Martin, if you guys want to look him up. He's probably the world's expert on development economics and growth theory. If you're soccer fans, he's an advisor for FC Barcelona, so I disliked him from the get-go. But he tells the story of when he was first in Ghana. Sorry, over here. Close. When he was first in Ghana, he had a few hours to kill before a conference that started at nighttime. And he didn't know what to do. So he left his hotel, and he started walking around. And he saw a couple kids playing soccer. And they looked like they were having a great time, even though it wasn't much of a soccer ball and it wasn't much of a field. It's a classic image in sub-Saharan Africa. And he stopped and he watched. And eventually, as kids do, one of them got hurt, and it ruined the game, and they were all upset and grumpy. Just a few kids who said, why don't I fix this? Why don't I buy them some candy? And he did. It cost him almost no money. This is a much cheaper economy after all. He bought them some candy, and they walked away laughing and smiling. God, this professor felt great about himself. And so later in the afternoon, when he saw a few more kids playing, he said, why don't I buy some more candy? What happened is kids came from everywhere. Kids behind him, kids to the side of him, kids to the left of him, kids in front. Kids came from everywhere. They said, OK, I promised to buy some candy. I'll buy some candy. It doesn't cost me much money. Please line up. You'll each get some candy. So the kids started to line up. They maybe got in a few fights because they were cutting each other, or little arguments here and there. But eventually they lined up, and they got candy, and they went on his way. And the guy felt good about himself. But the reason I tell this story is we should take a step back and look at what actually happened on this day. And so, yes, cheekily, laughing, there was a bit of violence with these kids fighting and a bit of corruption with kids cutting line. But maybe that's worth it for the entire good that was done of giving candy. Or maybe, if we try to answer the question, where did all these kids come from, you start to realize that the kids skipped out on school because they heard that the rich guy was giving out free candy. I would skip school for free candy. Halloween is a story of that day and again. And it's just a cheeky little anecdote. It's not much relevance maybe on a grand scale. But I think it shows how good intentions, the small little thought of giving candy, can really create perverse systematic incentives, create short-term realities that hurt in the long run. There is no doubt that each kid who got candy would have been better served by staying in school. No doubt. But what happened was a guy came with some money, decided he knew how to make a difference, made himself happy by doing what he thought was best, and left the world a worse place. Now, I don't mean to discourage you. I don't mean to say you can't make a difference. But what I mean to say is it's hard. It's not easy. We haven't figured out how to do it well. Now, one main reason we haven't figured out how to do it well is there's misaligned incentives between the people giving and the people receiving. Right? The people giving think they know what the people receiving should have, and they patriarchally tell them what they should have, and the receiving people have no choice but to accept it. In economics, that's called misaligned incentives. In your situation, it's called teachers giving you homework you don't want to do. Sometimes the teachers know best. Sometimes the teachers don't know best. Sorry, Mr. Bell. But what our Poverty Action Lab does is we partner with organizations to try and figure out which of their programs are working and which ones are not. And while the bad news is that all of them don't do well, the good news is the ones that do well do really well. And it's really cheap to have a huge impact in the world. So the set of studies that made our lab first famous was a series of studies we did in Kenya on education. So in the developing world, there are countless theories, hundreds of theories on what makes a difference when you're trying to educate children. Because you need to educate children. You can buy more teachers. You can hire more teachers. You can buy more textbooks. You can build more schools. You can do countless things. And so my firm said, all right, well, we have a fixed amount of money. We can't do everything. What should we do? What do you guys think? What was the most successful in educating students? Someone say teachers, please. Teachers. It wasn't teachers.
Textbooks?
Wasn't textbooks. It wasn't an option I listed. Think creatively. What do you think it might have been? Nutrition. Actually, that's almost spot on. It was deworming medication. Medication that for cents a person can deworm their systems, get them healthy enough and awake enough to go to school, and when they're in school, pay attention at school. But more than just that, healthy enough that they don't get their classmates sick. Healthy enough that they don't get their neighboring schools sick. Healthy enough that they don't get their communities sick. And for $100 of deworming medication, I have the numbers written down here, you could get another 13.9 years of students studying in school. $100. For one person getting one pill, 10 years later, earned 25% more in salary than people who didn't get that pill. They worked 12% more hours, and they were 10% more likely to have eaten 3 meals the previous day. This is a pill that costs 7 cents a person. And it's a solution, if you talk to most educational experts, they're furious about, because it goes against everything they've been saying for so long. So how do we figure out what are these effective solutions? How do we move to a place in our future where we're not only willing to try things, but we're doing the right things? Now, sadly, there's no easy answer to that. Right? Our lab tries. We succeed sometimes. We fail other times. I moved to Sierra Leone because the lab sent me there. Luck of the draw. I applied in March 2009 for a job, and I got rejected. I applied for a job with the lab in Kenya and in Malawi, and I wasn't qualified enough for it. They were so desperate in August of 2009 to find someone willing to move to Sierra Leone, they hired me. And so when I arrived in Sierra Leone, I was put in charge of a new project, a brand new idea, called inventory credit. It's a new type of microcredit product trying to target the rural poor. So who here has heard about microfinance in some way? Can someone try and tell me what microfinance is? Any brave soul?
Is it lending out small loans to people who have no money or resources to get the loan?
That's great. That's one example, and the most famous example of microfinance. Small loans to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to financial institutions. That's the subset of microfinance called microcredit. That's the lending side. And it's by far the biggest side. There's also the micro-saving side, which is setting up small mechanisms for poor people who otherwise wouldn't be able to save so that they can save. And together it makes microfinance, and it's a phenomenon that has swept the world in the last 20 years. Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. Banks have been built around it and made millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. NGOs have been built around it and have done lots of social good. But the reason, or one reason it swept the world, is because it's a little glamorous. Give out $20, set up an entrepreneur, set up a woman with a stall in a market who can then feed her family forever. No one talks about the bad side of microfinance. The region in India that had to shut down microfinance region-wide because of the spate of suicides for people too far in debt. So everything we talk about, everything that works really well, generally comes with a dark underbelly. But microfinance done well has transformative effects. Savings accounts for people who couldn't otherwise save means $10, $15 in the bank, no more. That's enough to pay for a doctor when their kid gets sick. $10, $15 in the bank, no more that's enough to buy food for a month when they're run out of their own harvest. So we can have transformative effects. The problems of microfinance often come when you're trying to enter new markets or when you're unable to reach the people who need microfinance the most. So we tried to set up a product in conjunction with 3 banks in the east of Sierra Leone. I'm talking a place where I would have to walk sometimes a mile through swamps to get to villages. I would be the first white man ever in a village sometimes. Places where the stereotypical image is probably the accurate image, unfortunately. But we set up a product where we tried to encourage people to save. And I'm going to skip the details because I don't have enough time. And what we found is that 20% of the people in the community decided to take up the product. And that's a phenomenal result at first. At first glance, you say, that's fantastic. But when you dig deeper, what we realize is the people who use our product to save were the ones who were already saving. We couldn't convince any new person to save from scratch. And there are a few reasons for this. One is, who the hell is this random bank coming to my community for the first time trying to take my money? Right? I mean, would you give a money to something you've never heard of before, a brand new thing called a bank? What if they don't come back next year? What if there's another war and I need to get my money now? What if, because I'm working with this bank, the traders I usually work with don't allow me to work with them anymore? Human systems are undeniably complicated. And when we look at the first response to any behavior, we usually see the response we want. But when we dig deeper, we don't always see good data. We don't always see the results we want because we can't always predict in advance how people respond to new situations. Now, that's the depressing news, and that's a lot of depressing news on development, a little bit of the bright side. But one thing I wanted to add, or one other takeaway that I took away from the story at the beginning of my professor in Ghana, that he definitely didn't intend, is from the student's perspective, from the kid's perspective who skipped school. We're pretty bad at knowing what's good for us in the long run. The studies are out there, the research is out there, we're bad at it. People still smoke, people still get drunk, people still eat unhealthy food, people skip classes. I'm not looking that way. We're bad at it. But that's okay, right? If you talk to people 5, 10, 15 years into their career, they tend to have a linear story of how they got to where they are. But that's the version looking backwards. Looking forwards, you never, ever know how you got to where you're going or where you're going to end up. I went to Sierra Leone on a whim, and I never would have guessed in a million years I'm starting a business. I would start a business in Sierra Leone with the people I was sent to work with. Right? I never would have guessed in a million years I would be at MIT, in Cambridge. I wasn't qualified. But when you set up a relationship with a place, they're more willing to take you back. I never would have guessed in a million years that looking forward, I'm probably going to work in West Africa. That's where my network is. That's where my understanding is. That's where my future now lies. And so how do you proceed in a world where there are complex systems and you don't know how people are going to react to you, and in a world where you don't know how you're going to get to your endpoint, let alone what that endpoint is? And I'm going to encourage this. I want one takeaway from this speech, is that you need to learn about yourself, and there's no better way to learn about yourself than to travel. When you travel, when you put yourself in a foreign setting, you learn whether you're more interested in the buildings or the people, whether you're more interested in trying new foods or lying on the beach. All are correct answers. But you learn what you like. It's very easy to think you like something sitting in a safe, secure confine where the goal of the day is to get a good grade. It's much harder to know what you like in an unclear world. And traveling, putting yourself in unfamiliar situations, will give you a new perspective on what you do and what you want to do. There's a lot of research that's come out recently on what makes people happy in their work. And it's something I wish I'd learned earlier, research I'd come across. And we always think research doesn't apply to us, but I promise you it applies to you. There are 4 things that across the board seem to make people happy at work. And the first is money. It's not money in the way we think. It's enough money that they don't have to worry about money. Once you have that level of money, more money doesn't make you happier. You just need to hit that base. The other 3 things are passion, recognition, and autonomy. Autonomy here is the ability for your decisions to actually be enacted, your independence, that your decisions actually are reflected in your work. And we're too young, and in 10 years, you'll still be too young, and in 10 years, I'll still be too young to have real recognition. And we're probably still too young to have real autonomy. We're never going to be the boss at our age. The one thing we can control is the passion. And passion can mean 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people, and it should mean 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people. And it's very easy for me to stand up here and say you should find your passion, but unfortunately, that's what the research suggests. And so I'd like to posit or to propose that the easiest way to find your passion is to figure out what you enjoy on a day-to-day level. And the easiest way to do that is to get out of your comfort zone and to travel to a new place. So if you have any questions, now would be a great time. That's all I have to say. I'm going to be here until tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to have a chat more, I'm happy to keep talking. Thank you.